So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the FIRE Forum 2023, the culmination of the FIRE project, and particularly to the infrastructure session. So my name is Natasha Doniou, and I'm the project coordinator of the FIRE project, which stands for the European Forum for Innovation and Research in Earth Observation, and is a project funded by the European Commission. So the FIRE Forum 2023 is, I don't want to say a particular event, but it is in a way, because it's a series of 6 online events, one of each of the target markets sectors. So here I would like to remind to all of you the 6 sectors of FIRE, which are the agriculture, infrastructure, marine and maritime, raw materials, urban development, and wind energy. And all these sessions started yesterday, and they will finish tomorrow. Each day we have 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. For example, this morning we discussed the urban development roadmap, and now we gather for the infrastructure one. So just a few words about the FIRE project. Our goal was and is to build a strong community and a well-defined process that captures the now and saves the tomorrow of the European Earth observation sector, and mainly to build a strategic roadmap for the future of Earth observation in Europe. And I'm very proud to say that the FIRE team within these 3 years of the project has succeeded. Now in the few minutes, you have the opportunity to discover the famous FIRE roadmap for the infrastructure sector. And then in the next 2 hours, we will be discussing it, and we will look the way forward together with 6 experts from the infrastructure, but also the Earth observation sector. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our speakers, moderator, for agreeing to join us today and share their expertise with us. I will also like to encourage all of you to contribute actively to the discussion, because this is the whole point of this workshop, is really to listen to this roadmap and give us feedback. But of course, it would be nice if you follow some housekeeping rules. So first of all, please rename yourself, because it's good for us to know with whom we are talking. It would be nice if you want to use the camera. It's always nicer to see your faces. Of course, ask as many questions as you want, but please do it, put the question in the chat, because this will give the opportunity to the speakers and to the moderator to see them. And also they will give, like Lefteris will give you the floor, and you can ask the question directly. And of course, as you've noticed since the beginning, we are recording this session. So without any further ado, I hope you're having a coffee and tea in your hands, and enjoy the infrastructure session. And we'll start the infrastructure session with a very nice video we have prepared for you, which shows what Earth observation can do for the challenges in the infrastructure sector. Immediately after, we will move to the FIRE roadmap, which will be presented by Lauriane Dewulf from Evenflow, and then Lefteris will take the lead, and he will be the moderator of the day. So thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the session.
So I guess now it's my cue to take the floor. Hello, everyone. My name is Lefteris Mamais. I will be moderating this session. Just very quickly, I'm co-founder of Evenflow, and we have been involved in this whole process of developing the roadmap. So you will hear in a minute from my colleague Lauriane more about infrastructure. But before that, I would like to very briefly give the floor to the panelists to introduce themselves as well, explaining also what is their involvement in relation to infrastructure. So first, I would like to invite Franz Immler from DGRTD. Franz.
Yes, hello, thank you, and hello, everybody, welcome. I'm Franz Immler. I work in the European Commission in the Department for Research and Innovation, DGRTD, and there in the Unit for Climate and Planetary Boundary Layers, where I lead a team on environmental observation. So I come much more from the environmental observation perspective than from an infrastructure perspective. Still, I hope I can contribute to the discussion a bit today. So what we do here in RTD is we program the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program of the European Commission. And here in environmental observations, we fund projects that deal with various aspects, observation systems, data infrastructure, but also the exploitation of Earth observation assets, data, and systems for various end users, including also infrastructure, resilience, and others. From background, I'm a physicist and I worked as a climate scientist for a while, so I have very much the climate perspective from my background. That's what I can contribute also, maybe. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Franz. Then I would like to invite Daniel Lopour from EUSPA to a quick introduction.
Thank you very much, Lef, and good afternoon, everybody. Also from my side, I work for the European Union Agency for the Space Program, and I represent the agency in this infrastructure-related forum also in this afternoon. And EUSPA, as such, is the agency that is responsible for managing the European Union Space Program, which was actually originating from the part related more to global navigation satellite systems. But recently, 2 years ago, our activities were broadened a bit and are involving right now also the market development activities for Copernicus and as well as for satellite communication in the future. From this FIRE conference perspective, I will try to add a little bit of highlights from the part of EUSPA, what we are doing in terms of supporting Earth observation uptake in the market. And last but not least, maybe add a bit of observations from my side, because at EUSPA, I'm responsible for market development, in particular for railways and for public transport. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. Then I would like to invite Lorenzo Solari from EA.
Yes, thanks, Lefteris. I'm Lorenzo Solari. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. And I am a contract agent for the European Environment Agency, and I'm currently working as expert for the Copernicus Land Monitoring Service. And specifically, I'm leading the production and validation of the European Ground Motion Service. And my role for today is I want to basically to report to you my experience in working with interferometry data at continental scale within the Copernicus land, and of course to give you my opinion about the use of such data for infrastructure monitoring. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorenzo. This is a perfect cue to give the floor to Giovanni, who has been seeing on the same subject from a different perspective a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me here. Obviously, I'm here with two hats today. I'm Vice Chairman of EARSC, that is obviously involved in the FIRE project and generally in supporting the extensive use of Earth observation in different market and different application area. And I am also the CEO of Planetek Italia, that is strongly involved in infrastructure monitoring. One of our leading product is Network Alert by Reticus, that is a geoanalytics product that looks at management of hydraulic infrastructure. Apart this, I'm very interested to this discussion because I want to share my views about the evolution of this kind of service in this infrastructure area, and moreover in the evolution of the user requirement in this area. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Giovanni. And you said the magic word here, user. So we have had the great pleasure and honor to be working with Helen Roth, who has been following very closely FIRE, but also represents the real users here. So Helen, the floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me, and hello everyone. It's great being here on this session. My name is Helen Roth, and I am CEO of VIA, a Norwegian innovation cluster working with infrastructure infrastructure, mainly roads, tunnels, and railways. We were established back in 2016. And our goal is to accelerate innovation in collaboration with public sector, businesses, and academia. So we are a Norwegian cluster with more than 100 members, ranging from the Norwegian Public Roads Administration, road owners, and then also contractors and companies in the entire value chain. And as an innovation cluster, it is our job to be in front and exchanging best practices across borders. And I think that's what's been great with the FIRE project, because my background is social sciences. I don't know much about, or did not know much about Earth observations in the start. So, but as being manager of a cluster, you always have to be a bit ahead of the industry, basically. It's kind of seeing what is coming in the years ahead. So I think this has been great with the FIRE project, because it has given us new insight into Earth observation. And also, really importantly, it's given us a broader network all over Europe. And I think that's a big value for us as a cluster. So I'm looking forward to this session.
Thanks, Helen, and it's really great to hear this perspective. I will very soon pass the floor to Lauriane to give us a little bit of this future view. But before that, I would also like to acknowledge that Lucy Kennedy, our evangelist, is also online. So if you just want to say hi, Lucy, and of course you can jump in the discussion later on as well. I would need to unmute.
Let me unmute myself. Oh yeah, afternoon everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a real pleasure to be the FIRE EU evangelist for infrastructure as well for the last 12 plus months. And apologies for being late, but I had a phone call for one of my kids' schools, and those phone calls always have to be taken. But it's all okay, and I'm looking forward to joining the sessions.
Excellent. So just to say a little bit how this thing will play out, Lauriane will kick things off by presenting to everyone the roadmap. Of course, this will be a condensed version, and you will be able to see more. It will be shared, and it's also a public deliverable at the end of the day. We will be then going into a discussion with our panelists. This will be organized in waves. There's not much need to explain much more on that. You will see how this will work out. As Natasha mentioned, if you do have questions that you want to raise, feel free to use the chat. And there will also be moments inside the overall flow of the discussion that we will sort of broadly open the floor for anyone that wants to jump in. So then, without further ado, the floor is yours, Lauriane. Yeah, walk us through the roadmap.
Thanks. I will share my screen here. So, hello everyone. So my name is Lauriane Dewulf, and I'm part of the team working within Evenflow, part of the team working on infrastructure. And I have also a background in economics with some specialization into research and development. So first of all, why infrastructure? It's because Earth observation has a big role to play in environmental impact assessment of infrastructure, but also into the planning and the monitoring, and then also into climate change resilience infrastructure. So all this, EO is very important. So I will go to the next slide. So, but first, before presenting the roadmap, well, the summary of very condensed, as Lefteris said, summary of the roadmap, we wanted to present you the methodology we use for the 6 segments that you saw earlier. So first, we did some research on the R&D trends, the market, some analysis of the past and ongoing project, but also the policy priorities and the user needs. But also, this research is not enough, of course. We needed to have the point of view of people involved in the sectors. That's why we organized some focus groups who brought very interesting insights about the opportunities and the challenges of the sectors, but also some operational realities of the sectors. And then also the fire community brought interesting insight as well through the various forum events, just like this one today, and also through the fire portal and by the EU evangelist. So all this allowed us to have to construct a nice picture of the current state of play and the future trends, and then to identify the key opportunities and major weaknesses and challenges, and define also an action plan. So that's what I'm going to present now. So first, quick reminder of the 6 segments. So we are into the infrastructure, but there is also agriculture, raw materials that were presented yesterday, urban development that was presented this morning, and then tomorrow it's about wind energy and marine and maritime. So now, brief presentation of this presentation. So we will look at where we are now, and then where do we want to be tomorrow, and all the actions on how to get there. So about the policy on where we are now. So safety, sustainability, and transportation, like coordination of transportation network, require important policy. Also, investment in infrastructure are about 10 billion euros a year, and the maintenance is about 25 billion euro a year. About the market maturity, it's about like the revenues from Earth observation are about almost 200 million euros per year. But to have an idea what it represents, it's about half of the revenues from Earth observation in the agriculture market, which is a more mature market. And then there is an important uptake of Earth observation in infrastructure, but it's still we can consider it's still at an early stage. So there is a big demand for more and better satellite-based solutions to reduce, for example, the risk, achieve environmental goals, and increase operational efficiency. So what about R&D in infrastructure market? So the upstream R&D is more about small satellites. There are many things, but that's the most important one because it allows to monitor at semi-real time and allows faster responses. And then the downstream R&D, it's real-time ground motion disaster mitigation system, for example, road infrastructure resilience, modeling earth surface deformation and seismic risk, and identification of water pipeline leaks, but there are many others, of course. It's just an example, and here it's just a summary. So we saw where we are now. Now we'll see where do we want to be. Of course, we want a widespread adoption in established application. These are, for example, ground movement mapping, but also assessing environmental impact of construction activities and vegetation encroaching on road and railways. We also want more use of Earth observation to help to adhere to standards and regulation. For example, it's more into sustainability, the EU transportation network, and safety of transportation networks as well. And we want to see also new application and markets. And it's more about, for example, detecting water leaks in pipelines, reducing any risk of infrastructure, and linked to that, preventing disasters by detecting ground movement at early stage. So we also want to see an increase of Earth observation capabilities of infrastructure engineers and operators. It's allowed, of course, to include Earth observation in day-to-day operations. Then we want to make Earth observation data access and understanding trivial. It's very important, and accelerate the availability and understanding of new technologies and data sources. This could be like the small sets that we talked about earlier, but also multistatic SAR and also various application linked to artificial intelligence. For example, digital elevation model and real-time monitoring. So we have seen where we are, where do we want to be. Now we are seeing how to get there. There are many ways to get there, of course, and many things to be done to get there. But here there are 4 examples. The first one is widespread uptake of ground movement mapping. And it can be done by improving the data storage capacity, by having, for example, also a handbook on INSAR technology and push application in EU and our national regulation. But there are many other things to do. But here, again, some example. We also need some pre-commercial procurement for road and railways operators, because Earth observation is used in vulnerability analysis and exposure assessment of critical infrastructure in road and railway domains. And the objective of this action is to expand the use of these services through the EU. And how to do that? We need to, of course, assess the current and evolving user needs through workshops, for example, and then assess what types of improvements are needed, and then organize, of course, the Horizon Europe goal, focusing on pre-commercial procurement. So another action on how to get there is to develop climate change resilient infrastructures, and to use EO in the development of climate change resilient infrastructure. So due to climate change, of course, infrastructure are increasingly exposed to many things like extreme heat. And for environmental matter, it is also important to improve the lifespan of infrastructure. So to get there, 2 examples are to launch a dedicated research and innovation action call, and to engage academia and industry together to develop solutions. And then the last actions together is incorporate Earth observation in regulation, especially driving large-scale infrastructure project. The one we think about first is the European Transportation Network, because there is no provision of the use of Earth observation in this regulation, and it's considered to be a missed opportunity for market development and the associated benefit. And how to get there? We should develop the current state of play, both in terms of regulatory provisions, in terms of practices at member state level, and develop a comprehensive roadmap for the incorporation of Earth observation in relevant regulation. And thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lauriane. You have, through this presentation, put many points that we will be then investigating together with our panelists, and hopefully the whole audience can get involved. So I would like to start the first wave of exchanges between us with Daniel, because you mentioned also in your introduction that EUSPA, of course, is looking over market development activities. Here we are discussing a roadmap. So I'm wondering, what are the actions that EUSPA is already undertaking to support the uptake of Earth observation in the infrastructure sector? And also, how do you feel about these type of points that we raised matching the ones that EUSPA has in mind?
Thanks, Lev, for the question and for your confidence in us. And it's with a great pleasure to see that indeed, in some senses, what you have presented and what Lauriane was talking about is somehow comparable with our view as well. From our side, as you know, we are adopting kind of a user-oriented approach since the beginning, and it was also the same case for GNSS. And within this approach, we try to identify and analyze the relevant applications also within the critical infrastructure segment, and also in the transportation domain for what concerns road and railway infrastructure. And one of the crucial or key activities that we are doing is actually the collection of the user needs itself. So our aim is to provide a comprehensive market intelligence for what concerns the segments in question. And for this, what we do is that we run the UCP, the so-called user consultation platform. And in the last edition that happened last October, we organized even a dedicated session, if you wish, for the infrastructure sector itself. It was done in conjunction with the European Space Week in 2022 in Prague, and the outcomes of these sessions are going to be published pretty soon, so you can see yourself then what we were able to gather as a first shot of the user requirements from the infrastructure segment itself. Then we also publish regularly the market report, and the last one already contained Earth observation topics and Copernicus. It's covering altogether 17 segments, but the infrastructure is also included inside. So I guess that you, as well as the attendees of our session today, are well aware about this report, and it's downloadable otherwise from our website. We are further in a regular communication contact with the EU industry in the different segments, including infrastructure, including road and rail. I saw that also urban development, agriculture. So this is what we are involved in. That's our daily bread, so to say. It's not only about being in contact with the key accounts, but also with small and medium enterprises, with several actors along the entire value chain, startup companies, etc., if I may mention, to sort of not only communicate what are the benefits and what EO offers, but also to help them leverage what the relevant services can provide in their daily operation and the daily practice. And I mean, for what concerns particularly the SMEs and startups, they are really in the spotlight, not only from the perspective of our communication activities, but also in terms of funding, because as you might know, in several cases, even in the past, in our calls, there were specific topics published addressing the SME involvement. And staying with R&D still for a while, you are, I guess, also well aware that within EUSPA activities, we are now having a dedicated research and development Horizon Europe call opened. It's open till the end of February, and it contains, and now let me come back again to the words of Lauriane, it contains a specific chapter to address Earth observation development activities, including pre-commercial procurement activities. So it would be worth to maybe take a look again at the details of the call, and eventually, if you would like to, there is still time, hopefully, to apply. But this is not the only initiative that we have in our domain. It's also about supporting entrepreneurship, and for that, we are running the Cassini initiative, or for what concerns specifically Copernicus, we are supporting also Copernicus demonstrators and associated procurement, such as the one that happened last year. What I would like to maybe highlight to finalize my short intervention to this question is that we are doing actually a similar activity to the one that you were presenting, and that we are designing at the moment and finalizing the design of Copernicus user uptake roadmap for several segments, including rail, road, and infrastructure. And over there, we are again trying to propose some activities and steps that should be undertaken in order to leverage the space program components and Copernicus to achieve the objective of having a strong user uptake also in the infrastructure segment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. And yes, definitely there are all these interesting streams of activity, and many of them, I guess, feed into the more, let's say, building of the knowledge base side, others more on the ecosystem development, and others more on R&D. I'm pretty sure, and it was the case also in the FIRE roadmap, that some of it, when it comes to infrastructure, is related to INSAR. So here I would like to pass the floor to Lorenzo. You mentioned that you have been following, leading actually, EGMS. And I wonder, how do you see the roadmap that we are presenting here? Also, more broadly, the market development efforts around INSAR, and yeah, what would you see as a synergy being there?
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, I read with interest this roadmap, the FIRE roadmap document, and I saw that actually INSAR is a big part of that document, and I'm really happy about this. And also, of course, that EGMS and also the previous experience of the national and regional services are mentioned. And as I hope you know, the EA finally published and made available to view and download the EGMS data in November of last year. And it was a real big challenge. And of course, it's something that within a service, European service has never been done. And but of course, we are happy with the results. And we are in the process actually to finalize the first update of the data that will come, let's say, in a relative short time. And I hope also that, of course, these data are useful for the infrastructure community. Because as you know, the EGMS is derived from the multi-temporal interferometric technique. So basically, we analyze the Sentinel-1 images to extract points of ground motion measurement, and we have 10 billion points, more or less, covering the Copernicus participating states. And for each point, we have a value of velocity, of ground, and of ground motion, and the time series. I don't know how many of these points in our map cover the 5 million kilometers of the European networks of road and railways, but of course we have a very good point density over these kind of objects, and so I think that the EGMS data can be a very good baseline for further investigations. And of course, we are perfectly aware that we maybe don't reach the resolution, the temporal frequency, or the precision that some of the infrastructure users will need. That's why I'm specifically using the term baseline, because I don't think that we are the solution, but we are a very good starting point. And regarding the specific team where the EGMS can operate, of course, I will see it because of its intrinsic nature of being a deferred time product. They should be used for maintenance operation, so to enhance also the level of security of a railroad, a railway, or whatever. And I think they are basically very good to spot you where something is moving, where something is, let's say, outside of the normality. And so it's a way to, let's say, to reduce the efforts and to focus more on specific parts of one track for example. And I saw in the report that there are some numbers regarding the impact, the economic impact of the usage of EO data and also interferometric data in terms of better usage of the money spent for maintenance. And for example, just a simple thing can be, we download the data over a truck, we divide the truck in some sectors, and we see the velocities of those sectors. And in a simple and a rather fast way, we have a synoptic view of the whole truck in terms of velocity of ground motion. So just to end this intervention, I would say that, of course, I see the EGMS as a resource for also for planning purposes. So when a new truck is being conceived, why not have a look at the data and see if there is something that is already in motion? There is a landslide that maybe can impact the truck. There is a subsidence that may hinder the truck. So that's it. I hope I stayed in the time. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Lorenzo. Actually, here I would like to pass the floor to Helen because she could give us a little bit the other side of the coin, meaning she represents a cluster where there are entities who would be the actual users of services like that. And here it's interesting to hear also from your experience having followed FHIR throughout pretty much the whole process. What do you see as the key barriers for wider adoption of this type of solutions?
First of all, I'm glad to hear that Daniel is talking about the small and medium-sized enterprises, because we as a cluster, we represent many small and medium-sized enterprises. Around like 60% of the members in the cluster, they are small and medium-sized enterprises. And I think in a busy everyday life, there is actually little time to explore new opportunities. So because everyone is busy running from day to day business, core business basically. So I think many of my members at least are lacking the knowledge of the possibility that Earth observations provides. And then again, I know because that's something we work with together as industry in Norway is how should we be do the maintenance, in particular maintenance, more efficient. Like Lucy said in the film in the beginning, it's spot on. We need to find new ways to do maintenance, and Earth observation provides us with huge opportunities to be more efficient and cost saving basically. But I think also it's no matter how passionate you are about the cause, it quickly becomes difficult to sell it if the customers does not speak the same language basically. So I think you have to learn the language of the customers. And I think it's important that those who work with Earth observation on a daily basis actually speak a language that the industry understands. And from my concern, that's the hard part though, because in Norway, lots of the people working in the industry, they some of them speak very little English as well. But then again, you have like the really good ones, the technology companies working on EU projects as well. So you have a good mix. I also think it's has to be taken into account that Earth observation, it's not for everyone. It's therefore important to have a clear understanding of who the target group is. Because for some of the cluster member, at least, it's this or Earth observation is not going to, or it's not in what they should be spending time on. But there are some members and some parts of the industry that Earth observation would provide like good opportunities for. Of course, as well, I think that's also with has to do with information, but costs also come into play. So in a pressured market with small margins, both public and private organizations must prioritize between nice to haves and need to haves. And then again, you have to explain where the cost savings will be, and if you are able to explain that to the industry, I think then that's really important. And also just to get started, it's really important to highlight the success stories and quick wins. Where has Earth observations been successfully used, and how could Earth observation become beneficial? I think that's really important. And as you were talking here, I was just listening in to what was said before. I also think coordination is important. If there's several initiatives going on, it's also important to coordinate. Otherwise, at least I'm just speaking on behalf of my members, they will get confused. Where should we start? If there's too much information, it could easily end up with, okay, we are not going to look into anything of it because there's too much. I can't absorb it, basically. So I think also coordination is important. So I think that was kind of, sum up what I think is important in terms of key barriers. But it's basically coming down to knowledge. We need to get more information out, and we need to get precise information out, and also get the information out in a language that the industry actually understands.
No, thanks a lot, Helen, and we will get very soon again back to the point of capacity building, and how to sort of break this barrier between different types of languages, between the different stakeholder groups. Maybe once again, piggybacking this and passing the floor on to comment precisely on this dimension, in this case to Giovanni, and so as someone who can represent the industry perspective of those that provide these solutions, and I would like maybe to have a sort of overview of how you would see EU adoption across the different types of applications in the sector, and where do you see the biggest promise, but also maybe a quick comment on this need to have and nice to have dichotomy, and where also the EU service provider sector can prioritize.
Oh yes, this is in the end the separation between need to have and nice to have is, I believe, in the story of Earth observation service finds the foundation. And what I see that is also a change in the user profile interact with Earth observation, because Helen mentioned the support in the design phase of an infrastructure. And so there you have as a user, essentially technical or engineering user. So it's a more traditional interface that we have in the world of geospatial service. What we see in Planetek with our Reticus platform is a shift from this kind of user to more managerial and strategic use of Earth observation data. So I tell you a story. We start selling Reticus Network Alert as a service for monitoring wastewater leakage. Then we understood that it was much more useful as maintenance support, strategic maintenance support. And so there the users see the real benefit. but what changes your interface? So you are not there to breaking the bits of or the centimeter precision of your products, but really produce data that fit within their informatics system, their strategic activity, and so on. So, if I may, a few words also about how infrastructure like the AGMS products from the Environmental Agency are useful for this. Because the more we as Earth observation industry can reduce the not recurrent activities for established service, we can improve our cost efficiency and the scalability of our product. In this sense, the ground motion products is a great product. For example, in Planetek, we're already working to adapt our product and service or what already provide the environment. Last but not least, there are two other points that is in favor of an extensive use of Earth observation. That is one obvious, that is the constantly improving the ground resolution of our product. But in the case of infrastructure, there is also a call from the user about lower latency of product generation. That is a dramatic request. This claims for a better integration between downstream and upstream activities, and for example, the exploitation of several onboard capacity in order to provide low latency spread products. And last but not least, obviously another big contribution is from development of artificial technology in product generation, again reducing the cost of scaling up application and services. Very well said within the FIRE report. Hope I replied to all your questions.
Thanks. No, even more than that. So thanks, Giovanni. To close this first wave, I would like to give the floor to Franz, because in many ways, the roadmap is also a hopefully useful input to the overall process that RTD may be following in order to roll out relevant calls in the future and so on. So what is your first reaction to the roadmap, and what could solution developers or even users expect in the near future in the context of activities that RTD supports?
Yes, thanks for the very difficult question. Well, my first reaction, that I can tell, I was quite impressed by the relevance of some of the examples that you show. I think it's very positive to see, or interesting to see the different perspective from the industry side, from the business side. Probably in RTD, we always have, or we tend to have a perspective more from the research side, and so it's very useful to have this somewhat other perspective. What I noticed also is, and that's a challenge for you in terms of RTD or generally work programs that we produce, is that it's probably infrastructure is addressed in very many different parts of the programs that we responsible for, and actually it's also in other programs. You mentioned a project there, I think it's called MOMPA, so that is funded actually from the Interreg program, so a different program. So it's certainly a challenge for you and also for me that infrastructure is kind of everywhere, or it's all over the place. Of course, it's also an opportunity, but because there's many different aspects to it that are important. So you will find topics related to infrastructure. I made a quick check, for example, in cluster 3, when it comes to disaster resilience, Horizon Europe, in cluster 5 for transport and energy infrastructures, in cluster 6 when it comes to Earth observation, in part when I'm responsible for, and I come back to that in a minute. But also, as I said, in other parts, climate services is in cluster 5 also, but in another destination. So I think it is addressed in various parts, and it may be a challenge for you to find the right calls in the right moment. So near future, I'd like to highlight, we have in the work program 24 a pre-commercial procurement activity, which you mentioned in your roadmap, I think at several points as an interesting option for the infrastructure sector. This call is very much focused on climate adaptation. So the climate resilience aspect is addressed, but it could be an interesting opportunity there in the infrastructure part. Actually, some examples that you show with the railway system that use Earth observation, for example, for detecting vegetation or something like that, could be very interesting aspects to include also this type of procurers. I think an opportunity in the infrastructure domain is that you have some big companies that are able normally to put some money into this, and also to do some bit more development work still. You don't need to find a ready-made app that is easy or free to download, because they can put a bit of, they could invest a bit. We talked yesterday about agriculture. For a farmer, he cannot invest anything. I think he just needs some services, but because they don't have the money. So I think there's an opportunity there. And another opportunity that I would like to draw your attention on is the mission for climate change adaptation, which is actually very much focused on infrastructures on the local level. So in some of the calls, I'm not into the mission too much. It's not my area where I work in my daily work, but I'm closely related. It's the neighboring colleagues here just next door. So there are some calls where local authorities should identify infrastructure, critical infrastructure that could be at risk from climate, could face climate-related risks from flooding or heat waves or whatever. And so that aspect is really targeted in the mission at a local level and in a very hands-on way. So it's really, the mission is really there to find hands-on solution to support the local communities, but also the local businesses in addressing the risks and in finding solutions. So I think that's something that's definitely worth looking into. Back to the procurement, there's actually an activity already ongoing that prepares this procurement. I want to say, and I will share the link to this. It's a CSA that is currently only called Protect. You can share the link in the chat. Maybe it's interesting for you for some of you to get in touch with that. And for the mission, I think you find a lot of information if you or I can actually also try to find a good link. I didn't prepare that, sorry for that, but if you Google for mission climate change adaptation horizon, you will certainly find a lot of information in the, I shouldn't have said Google. If you use a search engine of your choice, you will find a lot of information. Maybe I leave it with there for the moment. And
thanks a lot, Franz. And I'm sure everyone's keyboards and pens are catching fire with some of the points you are raising and opportunities that are out there. So this concludes the first wave. The first wave was effectively, first reactions from different angles and in some way, first validation, let's say, from different stakeholders on the key points that were raised inside the roadmap. And now we will try to go a little bit further and a little bit more practical. So the next wave will be focusing on implementation aspects. So I would like actually to open again with Daniel. You actually did mention, but very, very briefly, you said going beyond establishing key accounts, but actually I would like to stay a little bit on this point. So it's important to establish collaboration with key organizations, especially from the sort of pure user side. So not the Earth observation sector, but rather those that would benefit from the solutions that the Earth observation sector provides in infrastructure. Some of them might be the users themselves. Some of them might be opening the door to the users. So what basically is the approach you have to that? What actions do you have? And in a sense, maybe how can the audience benefit in the near future from these efforts?
Okay, thank you very much, Lev, for the question. As I said already within the introduction, we are focusing also outside of the key accounts on small and medium enterprises, on entrepreneurs and startups. And before actually answering your question, I would like to again underline that you are right. We are focusing on the key accounts. However, we should not forget that the market is not only the key accounts, and especially in innovative and technologically driven questions and in our market development activities, these small and medium enterprises play a really crucial role in order to drive the innovation inside. And for what concerns the big players, we follow indeed a similar approach. I would say even copy the approach that we took in terms of GNSS in the past. So speaking myself from my perspective as market development officer for rail, public transport, of course, starting from an approach taking advantage of our contacts developed within the associations, like, for example, the Community of European Railways, or even from the supplier perspective, the UNIFE Association, but also coming down to the concrete users like SNCF in France or DBNets in Germany. We already established the elementary contacts, and we are starting to discuss in a more broader sense what could be done on both sides in order to improve the likelihood of adoption of Copernicus and Earth observation in general. We are discussing in concrete terms also their potential involvement in our R&D program, in our activities that are again facilitating a wider sort of community approach towards development of new applications and innovative applications that these big players can then adopt and that they can use. However, we are also encouraging them to participate to our UCP in order to analyze or have simply the time to go deeper in the analysis of what is the real user and stakeholder need in terms of optimization of the cost that is related with their infrastructure management, because maybe it would seem a bit old-fashioned, but still we have to bear in mind that Earth observation and Copernicus, namely, is our product. It's a European system, and we paid for this system. And what we would like to see in the end of our activities is a sort of action where the bill is paid for in terms of cost savings that are generated by the deployment of these innovative applications that make the maintenance more effective. And in these terms, for example, for monitoring of the railway infrastructure, we see that there are several layers of the approach coming from actual site visits of railway personnel using different tools and techniques, going through the very expensive measurement vehicles operating overnight in a very short time windows. Then there is a layer of the drone technology that is now emerging for monitoring of the railway network. And what we need to establish is where is actually the border between the use of Earth observation and these additional techniques in order to facilitate the applications at the level of these key stakeholders. So what we plan to do in terms of key account management with the railway infrastructure managers is exactly establishment of where these borders are and where Copernicus and Earth observation in wider sense can contribute. Maybe one last point that might be also referring somehow to the already mentioned SAR measurements that were addressed here earlier. One of the applications that is very interesting and where it's difficult for the other techniques to be competitive with Earth observation is monitoring of soil moisture under the railway track. And we already know that from the perspective of Copernicus services, there is a bit of a lack in terms of providing the type of service that the railways would be keen to use, or which they are using already now, and which is delivered by some of the, if I may say, competitive, is not really competitive, but simply other systems, like, for example, the Japanese ALO satellites, which can deliver such a service and monitor the soil moisture down to a much bigger depth than Copernicus can. So we should also provide the feedback from the users back to the program in order to be able to decide how to reshape some of the Copernicus services in order to be able to address in more concrete terms this demand from the key stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Just a quick reaction to this, in case any of the audience is not aware. I suppose that all the outputs that you have referred to, user requirements and so on, it's publicly available to all. So even from this knowledge that you accumulate, I guess everyone can benefit in that sense. And then taking actually your last point and passing the floor to Lorenzo, there is this feedback loop between an activity like what we have done in FIRE, where we had focus groups, we had real users, the likes of Helen and so on, coming in, providing their inputs, then translating this into activities where in certain application areas we can try to push for wider adoption, but also the ability of those who would be on the receiving end to make use of those. And to make things a tiny bit more complex, in this case, we also have this subtlety between the baseline that EGMS would be providing and then what industry, like examples like Reticus and so on, would be offering on top of that. So how do you see this need for building the capacity, and how do you plan to attack that from the perspective of EGMS?
Yeah, thanks for the interesting question. And I will start from one of the last, let's say, things said by Danielle. And regarding the feedback, I think that reporting feedback on a specific product directly to the service is fundamental, because without us collecting the feedback, is difficult then to calibrate to new user requirements. And this goes also to the, let's say, to the opening sentence of Giovanni, saying that, of course, he would like to see where the service is going and if new user requirements are filled. But of course, sometimes it's difficult to become aware of user requirements without users actually reporting this. So for example, for me today is extremely interesting because I'm taking some notes to see if I can, let's say, compile some take-home messages from today, and to see where the service can be improved. But let's say that my key, let's say, message for today is that we are trying to do our best to reach a various range of users. But of course, please let you help us reaching you. So it should be on the two sides. And regarding user engagement, of course, you know that the insert data specifically are quite complex sometimes to understand. And one of the barriers I see is that people cannot fully understand what they are seeing. Because sometimes they are also seeing as some kind of raw data that needs a lot of work to extract the product you need. And but I also believe that if there is the proper teaching activity, let's say the proper user engagement, we can surpass this barrier and the data can be used. In this sense, for example, we are organizing a series of 5 webinars starting from March, ending in June, that are really targeting specific thematics. One of these is, of course, infrastructure monitoring, and I will share with you and with the FHIR group, the FHIR forum, the invitation, and I hope you will participate to know better. And regarding the language, we are trying to exit from the usual INSAR jargon that sometimes people can feel is that as it is too generistic, I cannot understand what are you saying. So we are trying to tell a story through the data. So to start from the data, showing how this can be used rather than explaining, okay, this passed through the interferometry phase, we have to filter out atmosphere. Because sometimes people doesn't care about this. They care about the data and they care about what the data are saying. So that's my message for today. And I also want to ask you, Lefteris.
Just left.
Sorry. If I can post in the chat the link to the EGMS viewer, just in case someone.
Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
See. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think here I would like to pass the floor to Jürgen from GAF. I suspect that you want to intervene precisely here. I would just ask you, to introduce yourself and raise your point as concisely as you can.
Yeah, hello, I'm Jürgen from GAF. I'm also involved in the production of the EGMS, also from the German ground motion service, but mainly in the projects for infrastructure which were run at GAF and together with partners in France with SCNF and with rail operators. And I fully agree with Lorenzo that especially the understanding of the finance lines is quite a difficult task. And we have to see when we deliver the data, we are delivering in a certain manner in different levels. If I put the data, for example, for a risk monitoring department at DB or SCNF, the people will understand more or less what happens, even if they aren't very good specialists. But if I'm giving for a rail operator or a field track operator at DB the data, he will say there are a lot of colored points, what I will do with that. I can't see anything because the movement is too small that I can detect it by eyes. So you will say, no, that's a user's information for me. In that manner, we were going ahead and classifying these points and just delivering results for them to ease up the understanding of the outcomes. So in that manner, they were classified as there may be hydrological regions, there might be geological reasons, and in that manner, the data were validated once again, and the validation in that manner was much better than only by the point clouds. But we have to see that it's a huge amount of data to produce, and it wouldn't be feasible to put for whole Europe each 2 weeks a data set. It wouldn't be possible right now for the processing, and a lot of times also senseless. In that manner, normally the operators are deciding that we want to have a special service on selected areas where we are putting an added value product. I think this will be also offered within Copernicus. There might be also possibilities. Another thing I want to carry out, we had a lot of other infrastructure elements that we can detect and monitor, like bridges, like electrical lines. For example, ports are suffering a lot of subsidences, photovoltaic plants, windmills. So the range of infrastructures that we are treating is quite bigger than only the linear elements. For sure, for example, for roads, it's more difficult because we have a lower point density, but normally in elements like bridges, we get a quite good density, just the sentinel data, and that's all.
Thanks a lot, Jürgen. These are very good points, and actually, it makes me wonder, and I will use this as a segue to the next question as well. You have seen, it was one point in the roadmap that Lauriane presented, the idea of having an INSAR handbook, and this is something that has been presented in the roadmap as a sort of equivalent to the BIM handbook that has been developed in the past by the European Commission as well. There was a task force on that. So I'm just going to leave it hanging there. I don't want to go too much into that because this could dominate the discussion, but elements like that, we hope that can be triggered from this roadmap as well. So then moving on, I'd like to pass the floor to Giovanni again. I mean, obviously you can react to the discussion that has been going on, but even more, because I know that you have a vision about the digital transformation that can go also through Earth observation of different sectors, obviously including infrastructure. So if you want, to share with us, where do you see the opportunities or roadblocks in that regard?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I believe that some of the points raised by Daniel can apply to move this vision of the future of Earth observation industry. Because, for example, Daniel correctly mentioned where is the border between the use of autonomous aerial vehicle or the use of Earth observation data. There is also a lot of IoT component in infrastructure monitoring that is very important. I believe that recently during an EARSC organized conference, I discussed how the user requirements moved from information, from having simple data to have information to have the wisdom. To build the wisdom, you need integrated data in a big data perspective. And a big opportunity for Earth observation is at the head of the pyramid of this kind of information, simply because they are global, available, but only Earth observation data cannot give and provide all the information needed to build the right product. Another interesting point is the business model. All the satellite operator is racing for a full vertical integrated business model. I have the impression that still now we have only failure of this kind of exercise. And this again is a point interesting for what's told by Daniel about the role of SMEs in this area. Because again, if you go in the direction of a vertical integration, you reduce the room for small, medium enterprise. In the end, you go nowhere because, again, it's very difficult to provide a vertical integrated Earth observation service. So again, here it's important to look the evolution of Earth observation service even in the case of infrastructure monitoring into a not a vertical integrated market, but it's what's called a multilateral market, where you have a different subject that exchange value. And again, value is a key point. Again, a bigger obstacle to be very efficient in providing the data to infrastructure is the fact that the largest part of this infrastructure are linear. All the Earth observation operator and data provider still mainly reflect in terms of square kilometers of information, and have the same approach on the pricing of data that is completely independent from the value of data. And so I don't want to take too much time in this, but again, it's very important that our industry try to interpret as soon as possible the digital transformation of the area. We see how much struggle other industries are having in following this transformation, thanks only to automotive and the challenge pointed from to them by subject like Tesla. Last but not least, again, having the environmental agency, the RTD, and the EUSPA around the table, it's also important to push for an approach that is not technology neutral from the Commission. So if we decide, we live in several years ago that Earth observation is strategic for Europe. So any kind of effort should be made for give priority to this technology, considering not only the use within Europe, but our global competition on this. And we know that our competitors are strongly subsidized, but from other kind of industries, generally defense. While we have a good argument to say that one of the leading industry that should be developed to match sustainable target from Europe could be Earth observation.
Thanks, Giovanni. No, these are all, I think, very fair points and deserving of very interesting discussions themselves. I guess also the message that Lucy shared in the chat points into the same type of debate, sort of where to draw the lines of certain efforts. But I would like to go first back to the digital transformation question and pass the floor to Helen, because you are experiencing that from a different perspective, from the perspective of an innovation cluster. In there, you also have the representatives of different parts of the value chain. So there are different, let's say, relationships that need to be built effectively or eventually for the value to be realized throughout the value chain. So what are the best practices that you can share with us that would help eventually seeing that a solution has supported someone in the value chain and then others are also benefiting in it?
Thank you. It's for the question. It's been a really interesting discussion to follow. And from my perspective, I think, or from our experience, it's going back to what Giovanni was saying just ahead of me. I think we need to identify a challenge that can form a basis for a common goal. If we are able to find some kind of challenge that is could be a common goal for the entire value chain, that would be something that we could keep on working with. I don't have a concrete example from this sector, but we are these days starting up a new large project in the cluster where we are bringing the entire value chain into the project. It's around 13 million euros, the frame of the project. It's called the Sustainable Value Chain and Material Use in Road Construction. So it's a project where the entire industry said we need to do this and we need to do it together, because we can't do it each and every one of us apart. And I think that gives some kind of motivation. So if we could kind of identify a common goal, that would both the road owners, the large companies, but also the small SMEs would find beneficial to work towards together. I think that would be a good starting point. And then, as there's been posted some calls here in the chat, I think if we could kind of identify a common goal and start working together to build a project together, I think that would be a good starting point. So also try to find some concrete challenges that everybody in the value chain identify with. That's, in my opinion, a good starting point. Like the project we started off now, we've been working with the state-owned infrastructure operator Nye Veier and also the Norwegian Public Roads Administration for like 2 years with finding the scope. And what's interesting in that project was in the Norwegian Public Roads Administration, we are bringing in also the department who do the rules and regulations. So we make sure that as we go along with the project, the rules and regulations and also the procurement regulations are in line with what we are going to develop in the projects. And then we bring in the industry with the innovative mindset, and they are going to build and the pilots, large pilots. And so there's like something output that's beneficial for all the partners involved. And then it's, from my point of view, if you're able to get that into the project, then everybody is really onto it and see this is good. I want to bring money in, I want to bring resources in. So I think that's, yeah, a key lesson, like what we see. If we are going to get the stakeholders in the entire value chain together, you have to find that common challenge and work towards that, and ending up with something in the end that's beneficial for everyone.
No, that's definitely a very powerful message, Helen. Thanks for it. And I wonder, Franz, if this gives any food for thought in relation to different types of programs or different use of the programs that we have in Europe to support R&D. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, for instance, the spirit of the missions is pretty much aligned with this, that there's a certain mission, there are certain goals, and the research and development activities are actually serving these goals. But tying this back also to what Giovanni was saying earlier about EO being a strategic point, these sort of large-scale demonstrators, do we have enough let's say, instruments, enough ways to support the emergence of whole value chain collaborations like that?
Well, thanks for the question. Not an easy one to answer. So the question is, do we need different types of instruments to support this? I do believe that well, we in the Commission, with the programs we are designing, are trying to cover quite a wide range of demands. So it would be interesting to see what is exactly not there yet. Probably one thing is to understand all the stuff that is out there already. So, for example, the missions is one example, which is a new tool that was devised for Horizon Europe, which is really has at the core really this very user-centric approach. This really bottom-up approach of bringing solutions to the people who need them, the local communities or the businesses. So that's a way of trying to address, I think, what Helen meant, to put the user right in the center. We actually have put this also as our key objective of the EuroGeo initiative, to go away from a data-centric approach to a more user-centric approach, and put really the user in the center and start and take it from there. I think it's very important. If you design services based on Earth observation, it's absolutely essential to understand from the beginning what the users actually need and how we can build this in the design of these services, how they should work. That also addresses the question of funding. Probably it's not easy to say from the beginning whether or not funding for the business plan, whether there will be a business opportunity there or not. It's probably something that goes along the way, and it depends a lot on the user. I mean, whether the user will be able and willing to pay for a service or not, whether you may decide whether you try to go for a business plan or whether you try to push this service into an operational service provider like Copernicus or National Weather Service or something like that, where it's provided from based on public money. So it's quite a delicate question, this one. But back to the user-centric approach, there's also wanted to mention the eShape project, which was kind of the flagship project for EuroGeo, and they have built up a co-design toolbox. And I don't know, there's also one pilot in that project that addresses infrastructure, and from what I saw, Planetek was involved. So I don't know if Giovanni knows more detail about that, but maybe he can explain it. One other point I'd like to make is we talk about Earth observation, and I think it's sometimes not so clear what is meant by that. A lot of people refer only to satellite remote sensing, but it's from our perspective, it relates to all sorts of Earth observation, and we need to spend. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities in really not looking at these different aspects in separation, and that's probably something where we may need your instrument, because Copernicus maybe focus very much on satellite remote sensing. But I think there's a big opportunity in linking various observing systems together, like having sataelites that indicate there may be an issue somewhere, and that triggers a drone to go there and check out what's happening. So this linkages of various ground-based, airborne and satellite remote sensing system could be one area where the funding that we currently have, or the funding system, is too much looking on one or the other, while the integration of the different systems could be a very interesting area to look at. Yes, with this, I think I made my points, and I hope it at least partly answered the question.
No, and definitely, and in some sense, it's unfair to put you on the spot on this. Obviously, EUSPA, EA, other entities in the European institutions ecosystem have themselves a role to play in rolling out different types of instruments and support. And I mean, to a good extent, they do. With this, we close the second wave. So the one that was looking more into implementation. I see that there have been a few points raised in the chat. I guess the second point by Lucy is more of a, part of the earlier debate. But maybe Ornella, you would like to take the floor and explain or.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, great. Thanks for the discussion already, and also for letting me raise my question. So yeah, in this discussion of the small to medium enterprises that have problems acquiring these EO solutions, then my question was, why are there not more initiatives to change the business models from these application sites so they could be more affordable or more accessible to them, eventually by making them shareable, changing the way they see the data? Maybe they don't need to see all the data. But in the meantime, I also got a reply from Lucy. So maybe Lucy, could you also elaborate on that?
Well, I guess I was taking it more from the point of view of a solution provider. So I think linking to what Giovanni was saying. So a lot of the big opportunities in infrastructure are linear infrastructure, thousands of kilometers of roads, railways, power networks, pipelines, underground and overground stuff. And this is a non-discussion for free and open source data, because of course it doesn't matter what the business model is, because you can just pull all the data and you can pick out what you want. But if we come talking about sort of high resolution services using commercial sources, we are to a certain extent constrained by the business models offered to us by our data providers. So, for example, in my experience, providers of high-resolution optical imagery have tumbled to the linear infrastructures. I can task narrow corridors of optical imagery capture, and I don't have to pay for the whole scene that my imagery provider captures. And that has enabled new case studies to be financially, as opposed to just academically, viable for clients in the infrastructure world. Now, we've talked a lot about SAR-based solutions, so land motion monitoring, and Lorenzo was saying about how, you know, there's a free and open source services that gives you a great overview as to see where you might have problems. But if you really wanted to monitor that on a sadly bi-weekly basis, right? It should be every 6 days, but sadly bi-weekly basis, you would have to find a value-added solutions provider that would go and do the analytics for you. And if you wanted to go even a step further and wanted to do it with high resolution commercial SAR, you would really struggle, because if you take a picture, you pay for the whole goddamn scene, whether all you want is a narrow corridor of it. And I haven't yet managed to persuade SAR providers that, you know, that they need to change in order to open up the opportunity, but they don't see the value yet, so they don't see why they should change. Typical chicken and egg situation there on that one.
And what would be a way that we could persuade them?
Well, I guess there are a number of factors to this, and I do see some sort of new space providers in this area who might be more open to it. I think some providers, they do 80% of their business with the usual government, etc. suspects, so there is limited push for them to change their business models. That's not the case for the newer entrants to the sector. So I think there's roles to play for EOEvangelist, for EARSC, to try and connect, you know, to have VIA explain the needs of their use base and why that could in X number of years translate to this many people buying this type of service. But at the moment, everybody's, you know, waiting for the other to move.
I understand. All right. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. And I see Giovanni wants to also react to that.
Yes, I have to say, first, one of the problems is that, that I don't want to move all the discussion around the satellite data operators of commercial system, but again, both this kind of industry, but also the downstream industry, should have an approach more related to the cost, to the value than to the cost of the product. So I'm sorry to say to Lucy that we try also with several new space provider to take this approach, but again, their business model again is based on the cost per square meter of per square kilometers of their data, the attendance of their investor is also based on this, so they are very stick on this model. So again, I agree with you that mission of EARSC can be also to try to move there, also because there are several very interesting ways to approach towards what is called value shared contracting that can work very well in a multilateral approach, where again a permanent scatter for an oil and gas company has a value that is a lot different from that of a small municipality in southern Italy. It's also the price at which I can send that pixel is a difference. Also in terms of the value that the data add to the overall application. So again, it's to move from value from price to value. If I
Agree,
may,
but I never said it would be easy, right, Giovanni?
No, okay, yes. Another small part was what Franz was saying about user-centered design of service and application. Again, this is again a history of meeting what people desire, what is technically feasible, and what is also economically sustainable. And in this part of the equation, again, the Commission can have a very big role, making more economical, feasible, the generation of some product for our customer. Again, if you look at in a perspective of global competition of our industry with the industry of other place.
Thanks a lot, Giovanni. These are very, very interesting points, and actually, I will give Jürgen, but please very, very briefly the floor, because then I want to pass on to the next stage. So Jürgen, you are muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the point is not only to give the client or the client to sell only the product. You have to see what's feasible. And in that manner, for example, I stand by what Franz said before, that you have to combine the techniques. For example, as we have seen for DB Netzwerk, for instance, when they have an hazard or something else, they need to have a response within 3 hours. So even the satellite providers can provide us the data in this short time frame. There are some special services who can do it. And I have to see also the costs. For example, if I will do a bridge monitoring, I have to decide if it's feasible for the client. If it is a bridge in an area where nobody can access, perhaps it's a good solution. But if it's a bridge which will be monitored just by drones in a better scale and which will attend, then that's a better solution. So I have to give them the opportunity to select. For example, I need some data for with high resolution for special cases, and for example, the operator makes a contract where he can get emergency images. But I think we as Earth observation providers have to be also prepared to make combined algorithms for quick interpretation, which serves the operator in that manner. For them, it's quite difficult to join all the different companies who are providing services and to put the service together. So, and I think EARSC can play a big role, especially to go ahead in this area.
Thanks, Jürgen. And actually, we are also taking note of everything that is being discussed here, just to say, because there is the desire to keep the focus groups in some form alive. And in the focus groups, the process that was going on was precisely this sort of osmosis between the ideas, needs, realities of the users and those of the providers. So these are all points that will fit into that. Speaking of which, and moving into the last part of our waves, I would like to ask two very connected questions, actually to all panelists, anyone who wants to jump in, but very briefly, please. So the first point is that we have heard about this importance of having the voice of the user very prevalent in all these activities. So how can we improve this? We have been attacking it in our sector from all sorts of sides to various degrees of success. So how can we make this work better in the future? And it's open. So whoever from the panelists wants to take the floor first, please go ahead. Okay, I see Lorenzo.
Yeah, if you want, I can start. I cannot give a recipe. I can say what I think about. For me, in this moment, it's the best solution for the service I'm leading. I strongly believe in use cases. I think that the use cases are the best way to demonstrate that something is good and is useful for do something. It's for me the best way. Also because some people will see, okay, this is a company, this is an entity that is similar to mine, they have the same way of dealing with data. They are leading to the same objective, so I can basically do the same thing in my specific area. This is, let's say, the best solution I find right now to involve, let's say, someone that sometimes does not know our data or have just a little understanding of our data. Thanks.
Yes, Helen, I was hoping you will jump into that.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up because I totally agree with you, Lorenzo. I think we need to showcase more examples. In terms of we have members that are actively using Earth observations, like the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute, NGI. They did present a use case on a fire group earlier on in this project. So the several of the members using Earth observations today, but at the same time, my experience is that the knowledge is relatively small among a great majority of the cluster members, of the industry members. And I think it's important to keep on highlighting the best practice examples for the industry partners. And also find the good example that feels relevant, where they can see, okay, actually they've done it like this in Italy or in France or in Germany and wherever, and then they can see, okay, and we might do the same, or that would be good for us to do the same. So I totally agree with you. So I just had like a kind of a sum up, kind of identifying the low-hanging fruits. Also find the good cases that kind of are low-hanging, even though we are talking about Earth observations here today. Try to find the low-hanging fruits and show the good examples, and start with those two.
If I may add, I totally agree, Lorenzo and Helen, about making new products, and we were talking about EO solutions. They need to fit the needs of the users. That's very important, and that these needs get translated into the right requirements and the right specifications. When developing EO solutions, we see it as a full innovation process, like we do here at the company EARSC. And when we tackle new ideas, we think in it often in three big factors. So you've got the technological factor, where you need to validate that it is technically feasible. You have the economical or the business factor, where you have to validate that something is viable. But I think that often the user factor is forgotten too much. And this is what we test and validate as the desirability. And how do you test desirability? Do you want to make solutions that people want to use? So it's not only the fit of their needs, but it's also intuitiveness, user friendliness, the competitive benchmarking, if there are not products that are very similar or very different. You want to make products that will be a success on the market. And I think that this usability testing is often too much forgotten. So I would suggest that if there are any programs being developed in the future, that the studies should also focus on this, making it desirable for the end user.
Thanks, Ornella. Daniel and then Franz. I think this was the sequence of raised hands.
Thank you, Lef. I just wanted to make a very brief and short comment. Fully agree with Lorenzo and Helen for what concerns the use cases. We as EUSPA are supporting these use cases, demonstrators, including all the lessons learned and kind of promotion activities associated. However, I wanted to just remind that we have already this tool called the user consultation platform, how to properly channel the voice of the users for what concerns further evolution of the program for what concerns collecting the user needs from the various segments. So for what concerns infrastructure, I just wanted to take advantage of all of you present now in the room to continue working also together with us and come to the next user consultation platform that we will be organizing, regardless if it's namely for the critical infrastructure part or for road or for rail, and support us to somehow determine properly what are the user requirements. We want to hear the voice of the users, and there is a specific tool for that. That's all from my side. Thanks.
Thanks. Franz? You are muted, I'm afraid.
Sorry. I fully agree that it's very important to have use cases and demonstrators, but I think it's also important to consider how we build these use cases or pilots or whatever you call it. And I think we went already quite away from where we started, but I think we still look at it a lot from the technological point of view. There's these Earth observation specialists that have their data and try to build something, which is good, but we need even more the transdisciplinary aspect, as we call it. If we build use cases, I think it's very important to have not only the technical people there, but also the business people who understand how to do business plans. They don't need to know much about the technology that they actually sell, but they need to understand how business works. We need to have people for communication that need to understand how to really reach the end users, how to reach out to the target audiences, and how to approach them. And so I think we need to go a step further still in this aspect of really integrating different disciplines into the generation of the use cases and or pilots, and really have this transdisciplinary aspect very strongly involved. We need more communication people in our projects. I always keep on saying we need more business people in the projects. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Franz. Giovanni?
Just to reinforce the spot made by Natasha about the same studies led by EARSC. More than pilots and application example, it's very important to know how works the value chain of a sector. So you can understand, this is in line also with the comment from Franz, you understand who is your real customer or your short customer, and several times you can also understand where is a market owner that can be maybe not the final user, but simply someone that integrates in their solution your technology or your proposal. So again, the approach in analyzing the value chain is, I believe, is one very interesting approach for developing an interesting case.
Thanks, Giovanni. I mean, I couldn't subscribe more to that because we have been very much involved ourselves in this. So I think it also fits back to this whole discussion about value versus costs, and how both can be analyzed, represented, understood, and become part of the decision of someone to become a user in the future. Now, we are very close to 4. So there's one important and in some sense tricky question that I do want to raise and have a quick reaction from our panelists, which is, okay, we brought together communities in different sectors. We distilled the brains of different people into trying to develop a roadmap. The roadmap is here. We're having a lovely discussion today. How can we benefit from these roadmaps? How can this become something that the different actors use in their activities going forward? So obviously, each one represents a different angle to that. But yeah, if you can share a little bit, basically, what are you going to do with the roadmap going forward, to put it simply?
If nobody says something, I could. Well, I think I have two well, actually, I can use the opportunity for 3 messages. One is I think it's a very useful tool. We are in the Commission, we are currently engaged in the strategic planning for Horizon Europe 25 to 27. And I'm pretty confident that the roadmap and the various aspects will play a role in this process. And I will be happy to share it with colleagues and have a look into it. I said the same thing in the agriculture session where we built a particular partnership, but I think this one is quite broad and it fits in several places. I mentioned the mission, and I can also advertise it there, but also some place where you can engage or people can engage. And I checked a bit with my colleague. There's now the mission platform, which will be hosted actually by EA, by the Climate Adapt platform. So that will be a platform to engage with in a wide range of activities, but also related to infrastructure and climate change resilience, which I think is related to this topic. So there's a platform, there's fora, there's various places to interact and to exchange and to get information on how to develop new initiatives or get new ideas or engage with other people. And the final thing is, I think it's very important to keep things going is the personal relationships. So this meeting is very nice and useful, but at some point it's also useful to meet people in person and to have exchange and have this personal touch to it that in online meetings I think get a bit lost. So we have in EuroGeo, for example, and I think that's another advertisement here. We will have a meeting in June, I hope. So please stay tuned to EuroGeo. And of course, we keep on also in the hybrid mode, but it's also important at some point to meet people for real and to keep to establish relationships. That's, I think, a key aspect.
Thanks a lot, Franz. Anyone? Yes, Lorenzo?
Yeah, if I may, let's say that for me today is, I hope it is a starting point for, let's say, a collaboration or anyhow, a way to collect new ideas, to collect feedback. Maybe if you deliver something from the EGMS to collect the use cases. So I hope this is not a one-time occasion. And in general, let's say that for me, the roadmap was a way to collect, let's say for free, the ideas and the feedback of the entire community represented by that document. So there are some take-home messages. There are some opinions about data format, what is good, what it is not. So I think that everything will be considered. I cannot tell you there will be an immediate action, but of course we consider everything. Thank you.
Daniel?
First of all, thank you for the roadmap. I consider it as a very interesting tool and input. Also, cannot speak for the other market development colleagues, but at least for myself, I will take advantage of it in my field for rail, road, and I believe that my other colleagues will do so as well. And for what concerns keeping the community together, I would like to also, as we do with all interested participants, to encourage you to take part on our activities, also such as the Horizon Europe call, which is open right now, or the future possible development of some demonstrators, because by producing the roadmap, the story doesn't end. It begins, and we need also capacities to help us to make it real. We cannot do it alone, and we are just a few people, and we will need for sure in the future a strong support from the EU community, from people who know and understand well what are the different caveats, not only technically, but also, as Franz was suggesting, from the economical standpoint, because without that, we will not succeed to convince the users to adopt. Thank you very much.
Thanks. That's a very nice message, Daniel. Giovanni?
Oh, yes, as I told you when I present myself at the beginning, I have 2 hats here. And so I have also 2 different messages for Rome. For what concern EARSC, I believe we can use this interesting discussion also to produce internal consideration within our industries into relation within, for example, the value chain, and fostering more debate vis-a-vis our data provider, for example, and so on. For what concerns Planetek, I believe it's very interesting because if you are an entrepreneur, the really hard things to do is to decide what not to do. So a vision about the roadmap is for sure useful. I ask to all my colleagues working on infrastructure to follow this seminar today, and I hope this will be benefit. Again, thank you very much for inviting.
Thanks, Giovanni. And Helen, you have the also honor to close effectively the session.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on what's been said. I think it's extremely important to keep on meeting. And also, like Franz said, it's nice to meet in Zoom and Teams, but it is also important, I believe, to meet in real life. And also, we just have to keep on posting the roadmap on the agenda. And I think also to succeed, it would be good to find some kind of a common project and also funding to work on a common project, because if we have a common project, it's much more committing than just meeting on a conference somewhere in Brussels or somewhere in Europe. So I think it would be a good idea to start working together and see if we can identify some common challenges and then try to find or build a project and find some funding for our project. So from my point of view, I'd like to keep on working on with you on funding or finding a project and find funding for a project, because I think that's needed if it should be, that would be a glue or some fuel to push us forward, I believe.
Thanks, Helen. And I hope the roadmap in general will trigger further collaborations for those that were involved already, and also those that are following today, or in general, the activities of FIRE. Which brings me to the point of thanking all of you, the panelists, and of course the audience, and passing the floor to Natasha, who will explain how this really will be followed up in the next stages. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lefteris. Thank you all for joining this afternoon session on infrastructure. Really, your discussion, your comments, your question made this workshop really a success. I found it very useful and valuable, and I hope you did the same. From the discussion, it's clear that Earth observation is really crucial in ensuring safe, climate-resistant, sustainable infrastructure. I gave you the reason to come to Brussels, so we can all meet in person. You can all come in Expandio 2023, is our annual conference, and I'm happy to see you, Helen, there. And maybe when we meet in person, we can even, organize another project. We can discuss how we can do more business together. So save the date. But then, closing, I'd really like to thank Lauriane for presenting this famous roadmap on infrastructure. But also I'd like to thank you, Helen, and Franz, and Daniel, Giovanni, and Lorenzo for your time and your valuable contribution. But also many thanks to Lefteris for moderating the session and spicing up the discussion. So from me, within the next hour, I will try to be, quick. You'll receive an email with a PDF version of the roadmap. And at the end of, next week, at the end of the FIRE Forum 2023, you will receive all the recordings and also the interactive roadmaps. Last remark, tomorrow is the last day of the Fire Forum, so you can still register if you want to attend the wind energy and the maritime session. You can find all the details on our website. And I don't want to keep you longer. Thank you all again for joining us today. Have a nice afternoon and hopefully see many of you tomorrow. Bye.